You're not in control of your life. You're reacting to it. And the scariest part is, you don't even notice it's happening. It doesn't look like failure. It doesn't feel like losing. It feels normal. Saying something you didn't mean. Spending money you didn't plan. Letting one thought ruin your entire day. And then moving on. Like it didn't matter. But it does. Because your life isn't shaped by big moments. It's shaped by the small ones you fail to control. Think about this for a second. How many times have you said something and immediately wished you could take it back? How many times have you reacted out of emotion and paid for it later? How many times have you made a decision in the moment that your future self had to suffer for? That's not bad luck. That's not timing. That's not other people. That's a lack of control. I remember someone close to me sitting alone in his car late at night. The engine was still running, the street was quiet, and his phone was in his hand. He had just sent a message. One message, 10 seconds of emotion, and the moment he hit send, he froze. Because deep down, he knew. That message just ended something that took years to build. No warning. No second chance. No undo. Not because he didn't care. Not because he wasn't smart. But because in that moment, he wasn't in control. And if you're honest with yourself, you've had moments like that too. Maybe not the same story, but the same feeling. The moment where your words moved faster than your mind. Where your emotions spoke louder than your values. Where your decisions were driven by impulse, not intention. And here's the truth most people avoid. You don't have a life problem. You have a control problem. If your words slip under pressure, you're not in control. If your mind fills with doubt and you believe it instantly, you're not in control. If your emotions take over in critical moments, you're not in control. If your money disappears without direction, you're not in control. And if you're not in control, something else is. Your habits, your impulses, your environment. They're deciding your life for you, quietly, every single day. Because control isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in the smallest moments. The pause before you speak. The breath before you react. The discipline to walk away. The decision to choose long-term over instant relief. That's where your future is built. Not someday. Not when you feel ready. Right there, in the moments most people ignore. And here's what changes everything. You don't need more motivation. You don't need more time. You don't need a completely different life. You need control. Control over your words. Control over your mind. Control over your emotions. Control over your money. Because when you take control of those, you take control of everything. In this video, you're going to learn how to do exactly that. Step by step. Not theory, not motivation. Real control. And if you know someone right now, someone who feels stuck, overwhelmed, or like life is slipping through their hands, share this video with them. Because this might be the moment that changes everything for them. Chapter 1. Your words are deciding your life. Before you even realize it, your life is being shaped by things you said without thinking. You don't notice it at first. That's what makes it dangerous. It doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like a normal moment, a quick response, a casual comment, a reaction that came out a little faster than you expected. And then, it's gone. You move on, but other people don't. They remember. Not everything you say, just the parts that reveal who you are when you're not trying. Stop for a second. Think about the last time you said something and immediately felt it. That shift. That moment where you wish you could rewind 5 seconds. You saw it in their face, in the silence that followed, in the way the energy changed. That wasn't random. That was a glimpse of how powerful your words actually are. And most people never take control of that power. They think communication is about talking more, explaining better, proving their point. But it's not. It's about control. Because without control, your words become reactions, and reactions don't build your life. They slowly damage it. I remember a moment so clearly it still feels real. A room full of people, important conversation, everyone focused. There was this one guy, sharp, confident, always had something to say. And for most of the meeting, he was impressive. Until he wasn't. Someone else started explaining an idea. It wasn't perfect, but it had potential. And before they could even finish, he cut them off. Not aggressively, just slightly dismissive. A small correction, a subtle tone. But I still remember the exact moment the room went silent. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but something changed. You could feel it. Respect didn't disappear instantly. It just shifted. And from that point on, people listened to him differently. Less open, less engaged, more cautious. The worst part? He had no idea it happened. Because in his mind, he was just being right. But here's the truth most people never understand. You don't lose influence because you're wrong. You lose it because of how you act when you think you're right. Let that sink in. Because that's where control's tested. Not when everything is easy, but when you feel the urge to speak, to interrupt, to correct, to prove something. That's the moment that defines you, and most people fail it, without even realizing it. Here's the twist. It's not your consistent behavior that shapes your reputation. It's your uncontrolled moments, the seconds where you stop choosing and start reacting. That's what people remember. That's what they build their perception on. And once that perception is formed, you don't get to explain your way out of it, because perception doesn't wait for clarification. It locks in instantly. That's why control matters more than intelligence, more than confidence, more than skill. Because if you can't control your words, you can't control how people see you. And if you can't control how people see you, you're not really in control of your life. Think about how this shows up in your day. You speak faster when you're nervous, sharper when you feel challenged, more careless when you're emotional. And in those moments, you're not deciding your words. Your state is, your ego is, your insecurity is, your need to be right is. And none of those are interested in building your future. They're only interested in protecting you. Right now. That's why so many people sabotage themselves. Not through big mistakes, but through small repeated moments of no control. A comment that feels slightly disrespectful. A joke that lands wrong. A tone that carries tension. Each one seems small, but together, they build a version of you in other people's minds. And that version decides who trusts you, who respects you, who chooses you, or who quietly walks away. Here's something most people overlook. Silence is part of control. You don't need to respond to everything. You don't need to fill every pause. You don't need to win every conversation. Sometimes, the strongest position is restraint, because when you don't react immediately, you create space, and in that space, you regain control. Control to choose better words, better tone, better timing. That's what separates people who are respected from people who are tolerated. And the shift is smaller than you think. Slow down your speech, even slightly. You'll notice things you didn't before. The way your tone sounds, the way people react, the moment where you almost say something you shouldn't. That awareness, that tiny pause, that's where your power is. Because once you can pause, you can choose. And once you can choose, you're no longer reacting. You're leading. Leading your words, your conversations, your image, your life. So the next time you feel that urge, to speak quickly, to respond emotionally, to prove something, pause just for a second and ask yourself this: Are these words building the life I want, or quietly destroying it? Because most people don't ruin their life with actions. They ruin it with words they thought didn't matter. Chapter 2. Your mind is quietly controlling you until you notice it. Your thoughts don't control you. Your agreement with them does. Your mind sounds like you. That's why it's so dangerous. It doesn't feel like an outside voice. It doesn't feel like something you should question. It feels like truth. I'm not ready. This isn't the right time. I should wait a little longer. And just like that, you listen. Not because you analyzed it, not because you proved it, but because it felt right. Wait, think about this. How many decisions in your life were based on thoughts? You never actually checked, not challenged, not questioned, just accepted. You didn't take the opportunity. You didn't start the thing. You didn't say what you wanted to say. Not because you couldn't, but because your mind gave you a reason not to. And that reason felt intelligent. That's how control is lost. Not through chaos, but through quiet agreement. I remember a moment that still feels heavy. A friend of mine opened his laptop one morning. There it was. An email he had been waiting for. The opportunity. The one he kept talking about. The one he said would change everything. All he had to do was respond. Simple. He read it once. Then again. Then he leaned back. I don't know. I might not be ready yet. It sounded calm, rational, thoughtful, but something about it felt off. Days passed. He didn't reply. Weeks passed. The opportunity disappeared. Someone else took it. Later, I saw him open that same email again. He just stared at it. Quiet. Still. And you could see it in his face. He realized it too late. It wasn't that he wasn't ready. It was that he believed a thought that wasn't true. And that thought cost him a version of his life he never got to live. That's how subtle this is. Your mind didn't block him with fear. It protected him with logic. That's the twist most people never see. Your mind doesn't need to be right. It just needs to sound reasonable. And once it does, you stop moving. You stay where it's safe, where it's familiar, where nothing challenges you. And slowly, your life starts shrinking, not dramatically, quietly. Opportunity by opportunity, decision by decision, until one day, you look around and realize nothing really changed. And this is where most people lose, not because they're lazy, not because they lack ambition, but because they trust their thoughts too much. Here's the truth you need to understand. Your mind is not designed to help you grow. It's designed to keep you safe. Safe from failure. Safe from rejection. Safe from uncertainty. But everything meaningful in your life requires all three. So if you follow your mind blindly, you don't move forward. You stay protected, and protection in the wrong direction becomes a cage. Think about how your mind works under pressure. You think about speaking up, and it shows you embarrassment. You think about taking a risk, and it shows you failure. You think about changing your life, and it shows you everything that could go wrong. And without even noticing, you agree. That's the moment control is gone. Because your actions don't follow reality, they follow belief. And belief is often built on thoughts that were never true. Here's where everything shifts. You don't need to control your thoughts. You need to control your response to them. Because thoughts will come, fast, random, uninvited. You don't choose them, but you do choose what happens next. Do you believe it, or do you pause? That pause is the difference between being controlled and being in control. Most people skip it. They go from thought to reaction instantly. No space, no awareness, no choice. But when you slow that process down, even slightly, you start to see something powerful. Your thoughts are not commands. They are suggestions, and not all suggestions deserve action. Some deserve to be ignored. Some deserve to be questioned. And some deserve nothing at all. That's where control begins. Not in silence, not in forcing positivity, but in awareness, the ability to observe without immediately reacting. Here's a simple shift that will change how you think. The next time a thought hits you, pause and ask, is this true, or does it just feel true? That question creates distance, and in that distance, you get clarity, because most of the thoughts holding you back feel real, but they're not. They're patterns, old fears, past experiences, conditioning you never questioned, not reality. And once you see that, you stop living inside your mind and start observing it. That's the moment everything changes, because you realize something most people never do. You are not your thoughts. You are the one watching them. And that means you don't have to obey them. You don't have to follow every doubt. You don't have to act on every fear. You don't have to stay where it feels safe. You can choose differently, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's uncertain, even when your mind tells you not to. Because control is not about eliminating fear. It's about moving forward anyway. So the next time your mind tells you to wait, to hesitate, to play it safe, listen. But don't agree too quickly. Because your life is not shaped by the thoughts you have. It's shaped by the ones you choose to follow. And the moment you stop believing everything your mind says is the moment you stop being controlled by it. Chapter 3. Your emotions don't control you until you react to them. The moment you react emotionally, you give away your power. It never feels like a big decision. That's what makes it dangerous. You don't wake up and say, today I'm going to lose control. It happens faster than that. A tone you didn't like, a message you didn't expect, a moment that feels slightly off, and suddenly you feel it. That shift in your chest, that tension building, that urge to respond. Right now. Not later, not calmly. Now. And most of the time, you do. You reply quickly. You raise your voice. You say what you feel without thinking. And in that moment, it feels justified. It feels honest. It feels real. It even feels right. Wait. Think about this. How many times have you reacted emotionally and then spent the next few hours or days wishing you didn't? Replaying the moment. Rewriting what you should have said. Trying to fix something that didn't need to break. That's the cost of reaction, and it's always higher than it feels in the moment. I remember a conversation that changed how I see this forever. Two people. Close. Comfortable. Used to each other. The kind of connection where you don't think twice about what you say. Until one day, something small turns into something bigger. A misunderstanding, a tone, a comment taken the wrong way. And then it happens. One person reacts. Not explosively, just emotionally. A few sharp words, a defensive tone, nothing extreme, but enough. Enough to change the direction of the conversation. The other person goes quiet. Not because they don't have something to say, but because something just shifted. You can feel it when it happens. That invisible line that gets crossed. Where the conversation is no longer about understanding, it becomes about defending. And once that line is crossed, you don't move forward anymore. You start pulling away. Later that night, one of them tried to fix it. Sent a message. Tried to explain. But it didn't land the same. Because the damage wasn't in the explanation. It was in the reaction. And reactions can't be taken back. That's the part most people don't understand. Emotions are not the problem. Reaction is. Feeling something doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. But reacting without control, that's where you lose power. Here's the twist. Your emotions don't make decisions. Your reaction to them does, and that reaction is where most people lose control of their life. Not in big dramatic ways, but in small moments that repeat. You get frustrated, and you show it. You feel disrespected, and you respond instantly. You feel hurt, and you say something you don't mean. Each time it feels justified, but over time, it shapes how people experience you, and that experience becomes your reputation. Unstable, reactive, hard to deal with, even if that's not who you really are. Because people don't judge your intentions, they judge your behavior. And behavior is driven by how you handle emotion in real time. This is where control becomes everything, because the moment emotion rises, you have a choice. You can express it immediately, or you can pause. That pause is small, but it changes everything. It creates space. And in that space, you decide who you are in that moment. Most people skip it. They go from feeling to reaction instantly. No filter, no control. But when you slow that down, even by a few seconds, you regain power. Here's something most people never realize. The strongest person in the room is not the loudest. It's the one who can stay calm when everyone else is reacting. Because calm is control, and control is power. Think about someone you respect. Someone who doesn't get pulled into drama. Someone who doesn't react to everything. They're not emotionless. They just don't let emotion decide for them. That's the difference. They feel everything, but they don't become it. That's the skill. Not suppression, not pretending you don't care, but feeling without losing control. Here's a simple way to start. The next time you feel that emotional spike, don't speak, don't type, don't respond. Just pause, even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable, because that discomfort is where control is built. Take one breath. Slow it down. Let the emotion pass through without acting on it. And then ask yourself, will reacting right now make this better or worse? That question alone will save you from decisions you can't undo. Because most emotional reactions don't solve anything. They escalate. They complicate, they damage. And then you're left trying to fix something that didn't need to break. Here's the deeper truth. People don't lose relationships because of one big mistake. They lose them because of repeated emotional reactions over time. Small moments, small comments, small reactions, until one day, there's nothing left to repair. And it all started with moments that felt small. That's why this matters. More than you think. Because if you can control your reaction, you can control your direction in conversations, in relationships, in life. So the next time you feel that urge, to respond quickly, to defend yourself, to prove something, pause. Let the moment breathe. Because power is not in reacting faster, it's in choosing better. And the moment you stop reacting emotionally is the moment you stop giving your power away. Chapter 4. Your attention is your life, and you're giving it away. Where your attention goes, your life quietly follows. You don't feel it happening. That's what makes it so easy to ignore. It doesn't hit you all at once. It doesn't come with a warning. It happens in small moments. You pick up your phone, just for a second. You check one notification, then another. Then something catches your interest, and before you realize it, 10 minutes are gone. Sometimes 30, sometimes more. And when you finally look up, there's this quiet feeling, like you lost something, but you can't explain what it was. That's the cost of attention. Not obvious, but constant. Wait, think about this. How many times have you started your day with a plan in your head and ended it wondering where the time went? Not because you were lazy, not because you didn't care, but because your attention kept getting pulled in directions you didn't choose. That's the part most people miss. Distraction is not just a habit. It's a loss of control. And the more it happens, the more your life starts drifting, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly. You're busy all day, but at the end of it, you feel like nothing really moved forward. I remember talking to someone who said something that stuck with me. I don't have time to work on myself. But when we broke down his day, it wasn't that he didn't have time. It was that his attention was scattered. He would start something, then check his phone, then switch tasks, then get pulled into something else. And by the time he tried to come back, the focus was gone. Energy gone, momentum gone. That's how attention works. It's not just about time, it's about direction. Here's the twist. You don't lose your life because you don't have time. You lose it because your attention is being controlled by something else. Apps, notifications, other people's priorities, all competing for one thing, your focus. And once they have it, they decide where your energy goes. And your energy decides your results. Think about how often you feel busy, but not productive. Moving, but not progressing. That's not an effort problem, it's an attention problem. Because effort without direction leads nowhere, and attention is what creates direction. This is where control becomes critical. Because if you don't control your attention, you don't control your life. It's that simple. Your attention decides what you think about. What you think about shapes your decisions. And your decisions shape your future. So if your attention is scattered, your future will be too. Here's something most people don't realize. Every time you switch your attention, you pay a cost. It takes time to refocus, energy to reconnect, effort to rebuild momentum, and the more you switch, the less deep you go. That's why most people never reach their full potential. Not because they lack ability, but because they lack sustained focus. They never stay long enough on one thing to see real results. And over time, that creates frustration because you feel like you're trying, but nothing is happening. That's what scattered attention does. It gives you the illusion of effort without the reward of progress. Stop for a second. Look at how you spend your attention daily. Not what you intend, but what actually happens. Where does your focus go when you're not paying attention to it? That's the answer, because your default attention is your real direction. Not your goals, not your plans, but what you consistently give your focus to. That's your life. And if that's not aligned, nothing else will be. Here's the shift that changes everything. You don't need more time. You need to protect your attention, because attention is a resource, limited, valuable, and once it's gone, you don't get it back. So you have to decide what deserves it and what doesn't. That means setting boundaries, not just with people, but with distractions. Not everything needs your attention. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not everything is worth your energy. But if you don't choose, everything will take from you. That's how most people live, reacting to whatever shows up. Scrolling without intention, consuming without awareness, and slowly losing control. Here's something powerful. The ability to focus is becoming rare, and because it's rare, it's valuable. The person who can sit down, focus deeply, and stay with one thing will always have an advantage, because depth creates results, and results create momentum. So how do you take control back? Start simple. Create space. The first hour of your day, protect it. No phone, no notifications, no outside input. Just you, your thoughts, your priorities. That alone will change how your day feels. Then build from there. Work in blocks. One task, one focus. No switching, even if it feels uncomfortable. Especially if it feels uncomfortable. Because that discomfort is your mind detoxing from distraction. And the longer you stay with it, the stronger your focus becomes. Here's the truth. Control over your attention is control over your future. Because where you place your focus is where your life grows. So the next time you reach for your phone or feel your attention drifting, pause. Ask yourself one question: is this where I want my life to go? Because every moment of attention is a vote for the life you're building. And if you don't choose where it goes, something else will choose for you. Chapter 5. Your money is not the problem. Your decisions are. You don't lose money. You lose control, and money follows. Most people think money problems are about income. They believe that if they just earned more, everything would change, and life would finally feel easier, more stable, more under control. But if that were true, then everyone who earns more would automatically become financially secure. And that's not what happens. You've seen it before. People get a raise and somehow they're still stressed. They make more, but they spend more. They move forward on paper, but nothing actually improves. Because the problem was never the amount of money. It was the way decisions were being made around it. Wait, think about the last time you spent money on something you didn't really need. Not something essential, not something planned, something impulsive. In that moment, it probably felt justified. You told yourself it was small, that you deserved it, that it wouldn't make a difference. And maybe it didn't. Not once. But it's never just once. It becomes a pattern. Small decisions repeated without control, slowly shaping your financial reality. I remember someone I knew who always said the same thing: I just need to earn more, then I'll be fine. And over time, he did. His income increased, his opportunities expanded. From the outside, everything looked like progress. But behind that, nothing changed. He still checked his account with a quiet sense of tension. Still avoided looking at where his money actually went. Still made decisions in the moment, based on how he felt rather than what made sense. And one day, he said something that revealed everything. I don't know where it all goes. That sentence is more common than people admit. Because money doesn't disappear. It moves, and it moves based on your behavior. That's the twist most people avoid. Your financial life is not a reflection of your income. It's a reflection of your control. Control over your impulses. Control over your priorities. Control over your ability to delay what feels good now for what matters later. Without that control, more money doesn't fix anything. It just gives you more ways to lose it, because money amplifies behavior. If your habits are disciplined, it grows. If your habits are reactive, it disappears faster. And the dangerous part is that it rarely feels like a mistake in the moment. Spending is emotional. It gives relief. It creates excitement. It fills a gap, even if only temporarily. But that's exactly why it's hard to control. Because you're not just managing numbers, you're managing feelings. Think about how often spending is tied to your state. You feel stressed, so you buy something to escape it. You feel bored, so you look for something new. You feel like you deserve a reward, so you give yourself one. Each decision feels small, harmless, justified. But together, they create a pattern that shapes your future. And most people don't notice it until it's too late. Until they realize they've been working hard, without building anything meaningful. That's where frustration comes from. Not from lack of effort, but from lack of direction. Because money, without intention, doesn't build a life. It leaks into whatever is easiest in the moment. This is where control changes everything. Because once you become aware of your decisions, you start to see money differently. Not as something to spend, but as something to direct. Every dollar becomes a choice, a decision about your future, not just your present, and that shift is powerful. Because it moves you from reacting to deciding, from impulse to intention. Here's something most people never ask themselves. Is this purchase helping me build the life I want? Not, can I afford it? Not, do I want it? But does it move you forward? Or does it just make you feel better for a moment? That question alone creates awareness, and awareness creates control. Because the goal is not to stop spending, it's to stop unconscious spending. The kind that happens without thought, without direction, without purpose. Once you remove that, everything changes. You start making decisions that align with your future. You start noticing patterns you used to ignore. You start choosing long-term stability over short-term comfort. And slowly, your relationship with money shifts from stress to clarity, from confusion to control. Here's the deeper truth. Financial freedom is not about having more. It's about needing less and choosing better. Because when you control your decisions, you control your outcomes. And that applies to every level. It doesn't matter if you have a little or a lot. Control is what determines what happens next. So the next time you feel the urge to spend, pause, not to deny yourself, but to understand the decision. Ask yourself, is this a reaction or a choice? Because that moment, that small pause, is where your financial future is decided. Not in big moves, not in perfect plans, but in quiet, everyday decisions that most people don't even notice. And the moment you start noticing them is the moment you start taking control. Because money doesn't control you, your decisions do. And once you control those, everything else begins to follow. Chapter 6. Your habits are quietly building your identity. You don't become your goals, you become what you repeat. Most people think their life will change when they feel ready, when motivation hits, when the timing is right, when everything finally aligns. But that moment rarely comes. And even when it does, it doesn't last. Because motivation is temporary. It rises and it fades. And if your life depends on it, your progress will always be inconsistent. That's where most people get stuck. Not because they don't know what to do, but because they don't do it consistently enough for it to matter. Wait. Think about how many times you've started something. A new routine, a new habit, a new version of yourself. And for a few days, maybe even a week, you were fully in it. Focused, disciplined, committed. Then something small happens. You miss one day, you feel tired, your schedule shifts, and just like that, the momentum breaks. Not dramatically, just quietly. And you tell yourself you'll get back to it, but you don't. That's the cycle most people live in. Start, stop, restart, and every time it happens, it weakens something. Not your ability, but your identity. Because here's the truth most people don't realize. Every action you repeat is a vote for the kind of person you become. Not once, but over time. You don't become disciplined because you want to be. You become disciplined because your habits make it normal. And the same applies in the opposite direction. If your habits are inconsistent, your identity will be too. That's the twist. You're not struggling because you lack discipline. You're struggling because your habits don't support the person you want to be. And until that changes, nothing else will. I remember someone who always said he wanted to be more focused, more structured, more in control of his life. But every day looked the same. Wake up late, check his phone immediately, delay what mattered, rush what was left, and at the end of the day, he felt behind, frustrated, like he was always catching up, but never getting ahead. Not because he didn't care, but because his habits were shaping a different identity than the one he wanted. That's how powerful habits are. They don't ask for permission. They don't need motivation. They run in the background, quietly, consistently, and over time, They become who you are. That's why change feels hard, because you're not just changing actions, you're changing identity, and identity resists change. It pulls you back to what's familiar, to what feels normal, even if that normal is holding you back. That's why people say they want something, but keep doing something else. Because what they do repeatedly feels more real than what they say they want. Here's where everything shifts. You don't need to change your entire life overnight. You need to change what you repeat daily. Because repetition is what creates identity, not intensity, not motivation, not occasional effort, consistency. That's the difference. Doing something once doesn't change you. Doing it again and again and again does. That's how control's built, not in big decisions, but in small, repeated ones. The decision to start, even when you don't feel like it. The decision to continue, even when it's uncomfortable. The decision to show up, even when no one sees it. That's where identity shifts. Here's something most people misunderstand. They think habits are about restriction, about forcing yourself, about removing everything you enjoy, but that's not what works. Because what you resist, you eventually avoid. Real control comes from replacement, not removal. You don't stop a bad habit by eliminating it. You replace it with something that serves you better, something that feels natural over time. Because your brain is always looking for patterns, if you don't give it a better one, it will fall back to the old one. That's why most people relapse. Not because they're weak, but because they didn't build something stronger to take its place. Think about your daily patterns. Not what you plan, but what you actually do. What you do when you're tired, when you're bored, when no one is watching, that's your real system. And that system is either building your future or holding you exactly where you are. Here's the shift that changes everything. Lower the barrier. Make it easier to start, because the hardest part of any habit is not doing it, it's beginning. Once you begin, momentum takes over. But if starting feels heavy, you'll avoid it. So simplify it. Make the habit small enough that you can't say no. Not perfect, not complete, just started. Because starting builds consistency, and consistency builds identity, and identity determines everything. Here's the deeper truth. You don't need more discipline. You need a better system of habits, because discipline fades, but systems stay. And the person who relies on systems will always outperform the person who relies on motivation. So the next time you think about changing your life, don't focus on the big picture. Focus on the next small action, the one you can repeat, the one you can sustain, the one that moves you forward, even slightly. Because your future is not built in one moment, it's built in what you do every day. And if you change what you repeat, you change who you become. Not instantly, but inevitably. Because you don't become your goals, you become your habits. And once you control those, you control your identity. Chapter 7. Your environment is shaping you. Even when you don't notice, you don't rise to your potential. You fall to your environment. Most people think they are in control of their life. They believe their decisions come from within, from their discipline, from their mindset. And while that sounds right, it's not the full truth. Because there is something shaping your decisions long before you make them. Something quiet, constant, invisible. Your environment, not just where you live, but who you're around, what you see every day, what you hear, what feels normal to you. And the dangerous part is, you adapt to it without realizing it. Wait, think about this. Have you ever noticed how your behavior changes depending on who you're with? You speak differently. You think differently. You even act differently, not because you're fake, but because your environment is influencing you in real time. Now imagine that happening every single day, not for minutes, but for months, even years. That influence becomes your baseline, your standard, your normal. And once something feels normal, you stop questioning it. I remember someone who was trying to change his life. He wanted more discipline, more focus, more direction. But every day, he was surrounded by people who didn't care about any of that. They avoided responsibility. They made excuses. They stayed comfortable. At first, he resisted it. He tried to stay different. But over time, something shifted. He started skipping things he used to care about, started lowering his standards, started telling himself it wasn't a big deal, not all at once, just slowly, quietly, until one day, he realized he had become exactly like the environment he once wanted to escape. That's how powerful it is. Your environment doesn't force you, it shapes you, and it does it without pressure, without resistance, because it works through exposure. The more you see something, the more normal it feels. The more normal it feels, the more likely you are to accept it. And once you accept it, you become it. That's the twist most people don't see. You don't need to choose your life consciously. Your environment is already choosing it for you. Through repetition, through influence, through what you tolerate. Think about the standards around you. What is considered okay? Is it okay to be inconsistent? Is it okay to waste time? Is it okay to avoid responsibility? If it is, then over time, you will align with that. Not because you want to, but because it feels normal, and what feels normal becomes your behavior. This is where control becomes deeper. Because it's not just about controlling your actions, it's about controlling what shapes your actions. And that starts with awareness, looking at your environment honestly. Not what you wish it was, but what it actually is. The people you talk to daily, the content you consume, the spaces you spend your time in, all of it is influencing you every single day. So if you feel stuck, if you feel like you're not progressing, it might not be a motivation problem. It might be an environment problem. Because motivation fades, but environment remains, and environment wins over willpower every time. You can be strong for a while, disciplined for a few days, focused for a short period. But if everything around you pulls you in the opposite direction, eventually you give in. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. That's why high performers protect their environment. They don't rely on willpower. They design their surroundings in a way that supports who they want to become. They remove distractions. They limit negative influence. They surround themselves with people who elevate their thinking. Not because it's easy, but because it works. Here's the shift that changes everything. You don't need to change everything at once. You need to change what you're exposed to daily. Because exposure creates identity. If you're constantly around people who grow, you start growing. If you're constantly around people who complain, you start complaining. If you're constantly consuming noise, your mind becomes noise. It's not complicated, it's consistent. And consistency is what shapes your life. Here's something most people overlook. Your environment is not just physical, it's digital. What you scroll through, what you watch, what you listen to, all of it programs your thinking. And if you're not intentional about it, it will pull you in directions you never chose. That's how people lose years, not because they didn't care, but because they were influenced without awareness. So how do you take control? You start by being selective. Selective with who you spend time with. Selective with what you allow into your mind. Selective with what you tolerate as normal. Because every standard you accept becomes a limit you live within. And every standard you raise creates a new version of you. That's the power of environment. It doesn't just affect what you do. It affects what you believe is possible. And once that belief shifts, everything else follows. So the next time you feel like you're not moving forward, don't just look at yourself. Look at what's around you. Because you might be trying to grow in a place that's keeping you the same, and no matter how strong you are, that will always slow you down. Because you don't rise above your environment. You adapt to it, and if you want a different life, you need a different environment. Because the moment you change what surrounds you, you change what becomes normal. And the moment your normal changes, your life begins to change with it. Chapter 8. Self-control is the real power, and most people never build it. You can't control everything in your life, but you can control yourself, and that changes everything. Most people spend their life trying to control things they never will. Other people, outcomes, situations, timing. They try to manage everything outside of them, hoping it will finally bring them peace, clarity, or stability. But it never works. Because the more you try to control the external, the more unstable you feel internally. Wait, think about how much energy you've spent worrying about things you couldn't change, how someone would respond, how something would turn out, what might go wrong. And no matter how much you thought about it, nothing actually changed. Except one thing, your state. Your focus shifted, your emotions drained, your clarity disappeared. That's the trap. You think control comes from managing everything around you, but real control comes from managing yourself. And that's the twist most people avoid. Because controlling yourself is harder. It requires awareness, restraint, consistency. It means facing your impulses instead of acting on them. And that's uncomfortable. So most people don't do it. They react, they blame, they wait for things to change, but nothing changes. Because the only thing they needed to control was themselves. I remember someone who always felt frustrated with life. Things never went the way he expected. People didn't act the way he wanted. Situations didn't unfold the way he planned. And every time something went wrong, he had a reason. A justification, someone to blame. At first, it made sense, but over time, you could see a pattern. Nothing was improving. Not his results, not his mindset, not his direction, because every time something didn't work, he looked outward, never inward. And that's where control disappears. Not in failure, but in avoidance. Avoidance of responsibility. Avoidance of ownership, avoidance of the one thing that actually changes outcomes. Your response. Here's the truth. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond to it. And that response is what shapes your life, not the event, not the circumstance, not the situation, your response. That's where power is. And most people give it away, constantly. They let situations decide their mood. They let other people decide their reactions. They let outcomes decide their confidence. And without realizing it, they lose control because their state depends on things they don't control. That's why they feel unstable, because their foundation isn't internal. It's external, and anything external can change at any moment. This is where self-control becomes everything, because self-control creates stability. Not in the world, but in you. It gives you the ability to stay grounded, even when things don't go your way. To stay clear, even when things feel uncertain. To stay consistent, even when things get difficult. That's real power, not controlling outcomes, but controlling your response to them. Here's the deeper shift. Self-control is not about restriction. It's not about forcing yourself to be perfect. It's about alignment, aligning your actions with your values, aligning your decisions with your future, aligning your behavior with the person you want to become. Because without that alignment, you drift, you react, you adjust to whatever happens, and over time, you lose direction. But when you have self-control, you don't drift. You decide. You choose how to respond. You choose what matters. You choose what you tolerate. And those choices shape everything. Think about everything you've gone through. The challenges, the setbacks, the unexpected moments. None of them were in your control. But your response was. And if you had responded differently, some outcomes would have changed. Not all, but enough. Enough to move your life in a different direction. That's the power most people underestimate. Because they focus on what they can't control, instead of mastering what they can. And what they can control is more than enough. It's their words, their thoughts, their emotions, their attention, their habits, their environment. Everything you've gone through in this journey leads to one thing: self-control. Because once you control those, you control yourself. And once you control yourself, you stop depending on everything else. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need everything to go your way. You don't need certainty. You move anyway, with clarity, with intention, with control. That's the difference between people who stay stuck and people who move forward. So the next time something doesn't go your way, pause. Not to react, but to choose. Choose how you respond. Choose what you focus on. Choose what you do next. Because that moment, that small decision, is where your life shifts. Not in big dramatic changes, but in controlled responses, repeated over time. That's how power is built. That's how direction is created. That's how life changes, because you can't control everything, but you can control yourself. And when you do, you don't just handle life better, you lead it. You don't change your life in one moment. You change it in the moments. You choose differently. And if you've made it this far, then you already see it. Control isn't about being perfect. It's not about never making mistakes. It's not about forcing yourself into some version of discipline that doesn't feel real. It's about awareness. Awareness of your words before they leave your mouth. Awareness of your thoughts before you believe them. Awareness of your emotions before you react. Awareness of your attention before it gets pulled away. Awareness of your money before you spend it without intention. Awareness of your habits before they quietly define you. Awareness of your environment before it shapes you into someone you never meant to become. Because once you're aware, you have a choice. And that choice is where everything begins. You don't need to fix everything at once. You don't need to suddenly become a completely different person overnight. That's not how real change works. Real change is quiet. It happens in small decisions. The pause before you respond. The moment you question a thought. The second you decide not to react emotionally. The choice to stay focused instead of getting distracted. The discipline to say no when it would be easier to say yes. Those moments don't look impressive. They don't get attention, but they build something far more important: control. And once you build that, everything else becomes easier. You speak with intention. You think with clarity. You act with purpose. You move through life with a sense of direction that most people never develop. Not because your life is perfect, but because you are in control of how you show up in it. That's the difference. And if you're honest with yourself, you already know where you've been giving that control away. You've seen it in your reactions, in your decisions, in the moments where you felt like you weren't fully in charge. But now, you're aware. And that awareness is powerful, because you don't need to go back and fix everything. You just need to move forward differently. Start small. Pick one area. Just one. Maybe it's your words. Maybe it's your thoughts. Maybe it's your reactions. And focus on that. Control it. Not perfectly, but consistently. Because consistency is what creates change. And change is what creates a different life. You don't need more time. You don't need more motivation. You don't need perfect conditions. You need control. And the more you build it, the more everything starts to align. So here's something simple. Over the next 24 hours, pay attention to what you say, to what you think, to how you react, not to judge yourself, but to notice. Because the moment you notice is the moment you take your power back. And if this message connected with you, if you felt like this was something you needed to hear, share this video with someone you know, someone who feels stuck, someone who feels like they're not in control, someone who's trying but not seeing results. Because sometimes one shift in perspective is all it takes to change everything. Thank you for being here, and if you're ready to take this further, I'll see you in the next video.